Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me on this webinar about sales pitches. My name is Christian. I'm a manager at Quadrant Consulting, and before joining Quadrant, I used to work in various roles in between sales and marketing for large global organizations. This also means that I have experienced firsthand how difficult it is to develop the actual pitch deck, and also how difficult it is to come across as compelling when you present it in actual sales conversations. Before jumping into the agenda, just a quick introduction to Quadrant Consulting. So Quadrant Consulting was established in 2018. We are approximately 25 employees, and we are specialized in sales excellence and marketing. This also means we have helped a lot of organizations to fuel their commercial ambitions over the years. In relation to what we're going to talk about today, we can offer a variety of services when it comes to sales pitching. So there's something about sales collateral, the actual pitch deck, something we can do, something related to the tools around the pitch deck, also something we've done before. And then lastly, sales training, so how to equipping the sales force to have engaging customer interactions early in the sales process. On that note, let me jump into today's agenda. So today, we're going to talk about mastering compelling sales pitches in complex B2B sales. And if you're on this call now thinking, oh, I'm not sure this is relevant for me, I don't work in B2B. I'm in a situation where I work with B2C or in a hybrid between B2B and B2C. I just want to say that when we say B2B, it's to stress that it's a complex buying situation. It means that there are many stakeholders involved and the decision-making is usually lengthy. So if you can recognize this from your own sales situation, this is definitely relevant for you. So we're going to start out by talking about the essence of sales pitching. What is it? Why is it hard to do compelling pitches? Then we're going to talk about some of the common pitfalls that we need to avoid. Then we're going to talk about the golden pitch deck structure, and we show you what a pitch deck needs to contain. Then we dive into how to develop it and how to activate it to make sure it sticks inside your organization. Lastly, we will have a Q&A session, and there should be a comment box or chat box where you can type in your questions. It should be on the right here, and we'll go through your questions later at the end of the session. All right, let's jump into the first topic here, the essence of sales pitching. So when you hear the word pitch, most people often associate with formats like TED Talks or Shark Tank. And I can just say personally, I love watching both of these. I'm a big fan. It's super fascinating to see great leaders and innovative entrepreneurs come forward and present their case and try to sell the company through storytelling and great passion. But in fact, this has very little to do with pitching in actual sales situations. So despite how inspirational these may seem, they're both misconceptions, really. Because in reality, pitching is actually not that much about selling. It's much more about understanding the prospect situations and challenges and help the buyer move forward with the buying decision. And helping the buyer move forward with the buying decision is extremely difficult. You see here the results of some statistics from the Jolt effect, and what you see is that approximately 50% of buying processes, they end in no decision. So does that mean that the purchase go to competition? No, it simply means that the buyer cannot make a decision. They stick to whatever solution they have. So simply sticking to status quo. So that's what you are up against when you're pitching, that the buyer find it extremely difficult to make a purchase decision. Let's look into why that is the case. So buyers are typically overwhelmed with information. This hinders their decision making. Let's look at some examples why this is. First of all, buyers use many different channels when they look into a buying process. Some of the information on these channels may not be consistent. It varies depending on channels. So that can be misleading, of course. Another thing is that many buyers consume a lot of content before they even reach out to the vendor. That's also something we need to be aware of. Also, buyers spend a lot of time in the buying cycle just deflecting information, trying to figure out what's right and wrong with the information that they review. And lastly, as I talked about in the beginning, typically there are 7 stakeholders involved in an average purchase. This means also that it's very likely that all the stakeholders receive different information and form different opinions based on the information they received. So when I look at these facts, I kind of understand why a buyer can easily get confused. So what drives customer loyalty and consistent buying from one vendor is not really related to what you sell, but how you sell. So according to a large study from 2008 with well over 5,000 participants, you see that what drives customer loyalty is not value to price or great products or the brand or the company in itself. No, it's related to the sales experience that the seller is able to provide throughout the sales process. So let's open sales experience up and see what characterizes a world-class sales experience. So according to a bunch of customers, they really like when a seller is able to challenge and provide advice. They also really like when a seller is able to provide valuable perspective on the market and unique insights. They also really like when they are able to navigate alternatives and help them prevent potential mistakes. They also like when they teach and educate them on potential things that they are not aware of today. So all of this characterizes what a seller should be able to do. And we need to be aware of this when we develop or when we present our pitch. We must tailor our pitch to make it easier for the buyer to make a purchase. And this is especially important when you are in the first step of the sales process, because this is where they probably are having more vendors in, and you want to make sure that you provide guidance and navigate them, and you'll be seen as someone that can take them through the entire buying process. So in the pitch we're going to make, we need to make sure that we make it easier for the buyer to make a decision. This is easier said than done. There are some common pitfalls that we need to avoid. Let's look at some of them here. First of all, something that is very typical is that there is a tendency to prioritize product over buyer. So I cannot tell you how many times I have seen what I would call inside-out presentations. So long presentations of how great we are, our fantastic history and legacy, and a bunch of technical product stuff. When you do this, it ends up being something that only a few people understand, and mostly it's very, it's not so much orientated towards the external audience. So I would encourage you to put yourself in the buyer's place and talk more about the market, their situation, the movements you see there, and some of the buyer challenges that they might face. This also means that to make a truly buyer-centric pitch, we must move away from talking about product features and talk more about the value that we can generate. And even better if we can do this on a specific stakeholder level. So tailor our pitch to a specific stakeholder and his situation and his or her pains. That is the ideal thing we want to do to make it more buyer-centric. Another pitfall that we see a lot is that there is a tendency for some sellers that they are afraid of talking about competition. And especially early in the sales process, where there are maybe more vendors involved in the buying process. But the problem is that the buyer, they don't have perfect overview of market players. We as sellers are experts in the market. We should be able to navigate. So to provide a great sales experience, we simply need to navigate and help the seller navigate this complex market and enable him to make the right decision. If you pretend that competitors don't exist, you simply risk leaving it up to the buyer to navigate the market and identify the best solution out there. That's something we really want to avoid. So let's just be honest about that there are competitors, and let's put it forward to the customer and talk about it. Another tendency is that a lot of pitches, they simply leaves no room for discovery. So there's a tendency to focus a lot on presenting your solution. And in real sales situation, that's not really the case. Of course, you need to present your solution, but a real pitch is more a conversation that is actually a presentation. So questions and discussion are absolutely crucial in the first meeting. You need to make sure that you qualify the prospect, that you understand their situation, that you understand their challenges, because you need to address those challenges later in the sales process. I also see a bit of a misalignment here between sales and marketing. Sometimes marketing are developing the pitch deck, and that does not necessarily work for sales. I have experienced myself developing a long pitch deck, and I've seen sales only using 5 of the slides. And I was like, what is going on? How come is that? But now I understand that obviously it's because you cannot have a bunch of slides in a pitch presentation. You need to have slides that foster discussions. So we want to make sure that we have that in our pitch, and we ask the right questions and have the right dialogues. The last pitfall I will put forward here is that there is a tendency also to neglect the buying process complexity. So as I said in the beginning also, the decision-making is often lengthy, and there are many people involved. So we need to understand that a pitch is the initial stage of the buying process. It's number one and number two meeting we probably have with the prospect. And we don't need to have everything in the pitch in the first meeting. So I'll say, let's save some stuff for later. For instance, if you want to go very technical early on, it can be a barrier. So I think that save some stuff later in the sales process would actually be a good idea. So make sure you only put forward in your pitch deck what's actually the most relevant, and save some stuff for later. There will be plenty of opportunities to go more into detail about specific solutions when you have a more, for example, technical oriented audience later in the sales process. There will be many meetings potentially before you can close a sale. So that was some of the pitfalls. Let's see what we can do to avoid these pitfalls when we have a sales pitch. So this is basically a summary of what I've already touched a bit upon, but basically you want to provide an outside-in perspective. You want to make sure that you talk about the buyer's environment, their trends and challenges that they are facing. You also want to make sure that you tailor the pitch. That's what I talked about, that you need to make it specific for the specific stakeholder. So if you are facing an IT manager, it's a good idea to talk about processes or how you can increase uptime. When you talk about procurement, it's good for you to make sure that he understands that you are a quality vendor, someone that he can trust. And if you are in a meeting with a business development manager, maybe you need to focus on how you can generate top line growth. So these are some of the things that you need to cater your pitch around to make sure that you have that you come across compelling when you meet the specific stakeholder. We also talked about competitive alternatives. You are the expert, not the buyer, so do not be afraid of talking about competitive alternatives. We also talk about that you need to encourage productive discussions. Make sure you have questions in there. Make sure that you understand and get more information about the buyer than before you came into the meeting. And do not overwhelm the buyer with, as I said before, technical stuff early on in the buying process, unless of course it's relevant. Save some stuff for later. And the last one here is also, because the buying process is so complex and so long, we need also to make sure that in the pitch we take control. So we put forward potential next steps and actions to make sure that the buyer understands what are the next steps here in the process. These are some best practice tips. In essence, to sum everything up here, it's the focus of your pitch should really just be to center the buyer to place the buyer at the center of your pitch. This means that you should talk less about you and more about them, the buyer. If you do this, I promise you that you will see great results. All right. Let's jump into what the golden pitch should contain. So this is where we go deep on also the structure. So first of all, I want to say that a good pitch includes slides. So I've heard many experienced sellers say that they don't need slides, and I think that's completely fair. And I think if they can do it without slides, it's totally up to them. But I also want to say that using slides can be beneficial. It can be beneficial because, first of all, it provides support during the customer interaction, so you can use the presentation as talking points when you present. It also makes the pitch more visual. So if you, for instance, are selling a very complex solution that's difficult to maybe explain, then you can use a presentation to visualize it. It also ensures consistency. So if you have a fairly large sales force that have individual ways of pitching, you can drive consistency by having a pitch deck. And also I want to say that it's super important to have a pitch deck that can also be sent to the buyer after a pitch. So it works as a leave behind material really. And it's also a document that can travel inside the organization across stakeholders. So overall, I would say slides is important. But also we need to understand that slides cannot alone make a good pitch. So we simply cannot bombard and overwhelm the audience with slides. And I think I said that earlier also, but a great rule of thumb here is to be careful with the amount of slides you put forward. I think a pitch deck should consist of 20 to 35 slides, of course, depending on how much information you have on the slides and also how long a meeting is. But this is a rule of thumb, and see if you can use that when you develop your pitch deck. Speaking of the pitch deck, at Quadrant, we have developed a structure that we call the golden pitch deck structure. The golden pitch deck structure starts with trends and commercial insights. This is where you present your view on the market and how the buyer's environment is changing due to XYZ statistics and data that you put forward. You then move into buyer challenges and potential solutions. So this is where you link the trends to how those trends have an effect in their market and how potential buyer challenges evolve from these trends. This is also where you present potential solutions to overcome these challenges. And after that, you present, of course, your solution as a response to those challenges. So this is where you address the challenges with your solution. Typically, this is very product-orientated or service-orientated. And then at the very end of the pitch deck, you talk about the unique capabilities. Here you want to show the buyer that you have done this before. You and your company are experienced in this field, and this is not the first time that you've generated value for customers. What you see from this structure is that the first two sections here, so the trends and the challenges, is mostly about them. So basically, you start the presentation talking about the buyers, and then you start to talk about you. This is also why it has the shape of a funnel, because you start from an outside and then you narrow in towards your own solution. This structure here is designed to spark interest and position your expertise as a solution to address the discussed trends and challenges. I promise you that it works. So hopefully you will try this when you build your pitch deck. Let's dive into each of the sections in the following slides. First of all, trends and commercial insights. What you have on the right in an example from a cybersecurity industry. But what you basically want to do here is to have data and statistics that is relevant for the buyer's environment. Why you do this is, of course, to establish a bit of credibility, but also find mobilizers to have a great discussion with the buyers. Show them you understand the environment they're in. How you do it? So what kind of trends you should focus on? First of all, the trends you put in here, they need to be reliable. You don't want to have a discussion with the buyer whether or not it's true or not what you put forward. So make sure that it's reliable sources you use, and also update it, of course. Then there's something about that it needs to resonate. If your trends do not resonate with the buyer, you simply risk that it will not be relevant. So don't just put trends forward there just to put some numbers on it. It needs to be something that the buyer see value in and is relevant for them. The last one is relevance. You also want to make sure that the trends you put forward are somehow linked to the solution you are presenting later. So there needs to be a link between the trends and your solution. In the case here with cybersecurity, you see that first of all, there is a trend around that cybersecurity is becoming the #1 business threat, and also what is the average cost of the average cost of a breach is typically 32 million Danish crowns, and is expected to increase throughout the years. Also, many companies find themselves super immature to protect themselves for cyber attacks, and this all speaks to that something needs to be done to make sure that that you can address these trends later. So this is just an example from cybersecurity industry. Let's move forward to the next one. So here we talk about the buyer challenges, it's very important that the buyer challenges you present are connected to the trends you have earlier. So it's basically just saying, okay, so these trends, based on these trends, challenges emerges. And why you want to have challenges is because you really want to have a discussion with the customer about what potential challenges do you see out there. We have put forward some challenges. Can you see yourself in these challenges? And how do you cope with these challenges today? This is super important to make sure that you qualify and understand their situation. Again, you also want to put forward here potential solutions, because you also ideally want to have a discussion around what have you done until now? Why did it not work? Why is it not working as sufficient as you could have hoped for? So when you present the challenges in your deck, I encourage you to use generic challenges. Do not go super specific and unique on them. Make sure that they are generic enough for the buyer to resonate with. And when you also present the potential solution, maybe do not necessarily focus on mentioning competitors by name, but focus on potential approaches. In the cyber industry, for instance, there are typically three ways to address cyber protection. It's generic solution, point solution, or end-to-end approaches. And more or less all vendors in this space, you can put their solution into one of these three buckets. So here it would be enough just to talk about potential approaches. And then, of course, if the dialogue, if it's relevant to talk about competitors here by name, do not be afraid of mentioning. I'm just saying you can just do this by only focusing on specific approaches if you really don't want to mention competitors by name. The last, number 3 section here is about proposed solution. This is where you present your value proposition and your USPs that is needed to guarantee that you have the best solution to address the presented buyer challenges. You do this, of course, to make sure that the customer understands why you are the right vendor for them to proceed with. And when you do it, I think it's very important, as we also talked about earlier, do not go too technical on it. Make sure that you talk about value and make sure that the benefits come across in a way that the buyer really understands what you mean. In the case you have here for the example we have shown here, there's something about what it means when we talk end-to-end. There's an overview of the services that we're able to provide. And then lastly, there is a slide of some of the benefits that we can generate for the customer. This is just an example, and there will potentially be more slides in this section, but it's just to show you what it could look like. In the last section here, we talk about our unique capabilities. So in the proposed solution, it was mostly related to the product, the USPs, and the services we're able to provide. Here we need to talk about our company, so capabilities that are related to our company or our history. So why is that necessary? Well, it is necessary because when you have come this far, you have presented trends, you have presented challenges, and you have also presented a solution. There might be other vendors in the space that are able to provide similar solutions. So what you basically want to show here is that you have the right expertise to bring that value to the customer. You want to show that you've done it before, and you basically want to reduce risk in the buyer's mind. So how you could do this is to, for instance, in this section, you can include some what we call reference cases. So showing you that you have done this before for other clients. You could also show your team that is going to deliver the solution and how experienced they are in doing that. Or maybe you can show a business case showing concrete outcomes, again, for another client that you have helped. This is a great way to establish the credibility that you want to establish. Let's look at what it looks like when everything comes together. I know I said that you should start with an outside-in perspective, but I also think it would be naive to think that if you are in a meeting with a person you've never met before, of course you need to have an introduction slide. But make it brief and make it simple and keep it as 1 to 2 slides. So there needs to be, of course, a short introduction. And then we go into the trends section. And please note here that how we phrase that. It's not necessarily that we talk about trends and commercial insights. We call it our observations, our perspective of the market. We talk about the trends, and after those trends has been presented, it would be ideal to have a discussion. So how do you cope? So dear customer, how do you cope with these trends today? What are you seeing in your industry? Again, foster the discussion. Then we talk about their situation. You present the challenges that comes based on these trends, and then you present potential solution. Again, we want to have a discussion here. So you ask the buyer, how do these challenges resonate with you? What solution have you looked into earlier? Did it work? Did it not work? Why not? We want to have a discussion around it. Then you talk about your solution. I'm not going to go too deep on this. We've already talked about it, but this is where you present your slides and talk about you. And again, I think you could also have a great discussion here. So after you've presented your solution, why not ask the buyer, what benefits do you see using this? Can you see your organization benefit from our solution? It's always great to have the customer say it, even though that you have just presented the benefits for them. So have that again as a discussion after you've presented your solution. And then lastly, your unique capabilities. In this case, it's a reference story showing that you are the expert and you've done it before. And as a last part of the pitch deck, I touched upon this earlier, you need to have clear, concrete next steps. So it could, for instance, be that you say, okay, I would like to show you a demo. That could be next step. It could be that we should have another meeting that involves more technically oriented stakeholders. It could be that you want to send them a few documents so they can look further into your solution. The point is that there are several next steps that could be taken, and you want to put those forward to make sure that you take control and help them. Okay, let's talk a bit about how, now you have the structure of the pitch deck, let's talk about how you begin actually developing, crafting it, and how you can activate it in your organization. There are 5 key steps that you need to follow to craft compelling pitch decks. First of all, you need to set the team and appoint an owner. And when I say set the team, it's because usually this lies in marketing. Creating the pitch deck is a task that lies in marketing. I think it's absolutely crucial that you involve an experienced seller. You want to make sure that you understand what's actually going on in those meetings. So make sure you have someone from sales. And eventually the pitch deck will need to be updated. So you also want to appoint an owner, someone that is responsible for updating it and sending out in the organization whenever there's updates to it. The next step is to define the scope. So what do I mean by that? I mean, how many pitch decks do you need? Do you have, are you one company that sells one solution? Then obviously you just need a company specific pitch deck. Do you have different solutions across different industries? Then you need industry specific pitch decks. Do you have a variety of products? Then you need product specific pitch decks. The point is that you need to define how many pitch decks do we actually need to make sure we are prepared for all the different early customer conversation we might have. And then there's also something about understanding the customer stakeholders that you're likely to meet. So try to map out who are you potentially meeting in these first meetings. What are their focus areas? What are their pain points? It's very important that you understand this to make sure that you address whatever is relevant for these stakeholders. This also means that you might need to revisit your positioning and USPs. This does not mean that you need to develop a brand new value proposition. It just means that you need to refine some of the USPs because you need to make sure that they actually address the specific stakeholder. And lastly, you want to make sure that you build drafts before you develop and finalize. And this is because eventually you will need to get input. It takes time. I can tell you it takes time because I've done this many times. It takes time to build a pitch deck. And there's a lot of people usually that wants to be involved and have a say. So make sure you have rounds of drafts before you finalize the deck. Okay, we are almost done here, but I'm just going to take you through some of the tools here that is essential to make sure that you activate it well inside the organization. So when we talk about there is a phase before the actual pitch meeting, there is the execution part, and then there's the follow-up phase. In the preparation phase, so before a seller jumps onto the call where he needs to execute, you can easily prepare a tool for him where you map out again these stakeholders that he ideally will meet. Again, these are the stakeholders that he's likely to meet, some of their key focus areas, and some of their pain points. This helps the seller to really understand, okay, I'm meeting with an IT manager now. This is probably what I should focus my pitch on, these 3 bullet points here. So a super practical and helpful tool to ensure proper preparation. Another preparation tool we also talked about is the reference story case. We've already talked about it, but it's not enough only maybe to have one. Perhaps you need specific and you need, perhaps you need more and industry specific reference cases. So this is again a great tool for the seller just to look at and bring to the meeting before executing. When it comes to the execution phase, you could help the seller here by, if you develop those 20 to 35 slides, why not have a one-pager with ideal talking points and questions to ask to foster great discussions? So basically having this, as we call the meeting execution sheet, basically a summary of the entire pitch deck. I think that is a super helpful thing to develop. Another thing that we also know is there's always objections from customers, and having a sheet that stresses those objections and how to handle them effectively is super valuable for the seller, and it helps him execute the meeting. So objection handling sheet is also something that can really help your pitch come across more compelling. The last part is the follow-up phase, and here why not develop a follow-up email, so a template that the seller can use to send out after he's executed the meeting. There's always going to be a follow-up email, so why not develop it and help the seller, and then he can just add a few bullets here and there depending on what the outcomes were for the meeting. So these are some of the tools that I encourage you to develop around the pitch deck to make sure that it's implemented well in the organization. Okay, and last thing I just want to say is that you cannot underestimate the power of practice. Your pitch will only become better by practice. So practice, and make sure that new hires and also experienced sellers, they practice their pitch. That was it for now. Now we want to jump into a Q&A session to see some of your questions. Sorry, I'm just struggling a little bit with finding those questions. Let's see if I can find them here. Hannibal, if you're listening, if you can hear me, Hannibal, please come into the room and help me find those questions.
All right, we've had some problems today, but let's see if we can make it work. Here you go.
All right, thank you. Sorry for that. So there's a question here. What do you do? What do I do if the customer does not see the same trends in the market? Again, this is about finding the. Oh, sorry, I see the question here. In what manner should the competitive alternatives be presented so the buyer doesn't end up at our competitors? In what manner? I think, as I said, you should start by presenting the challenges and then potential solution. So in what manner should the competitive alternatives be presented? It depends again, I think, on your specific solution that you want to point towards. So if you already know by now that, for instance, you're selling cybersecurity solutions, and you know that you have an end-to-end solution, and you know that is the best solution because that's what you believe, then obviously you want to position those other alternatives as not as good. So in this way, I'll probably start by presenting the solutions that you feel are perhaps most far away from your own solution, and then end up with your own solution when you present those. That's how I would do it. Yeah, what is your perspective when dealing with a non-professional buyer? Also, how do you see this conversation in situation where there is little time or the meeting is not planned? Let me start by focusing on the last part of the question. So how do you see this conversation in situations where there's little time or the meeting is not planned? I would say that, as we talked about before, we talked about slides and using slides. And experienced sellers, they don't really need slides. This also means that the pitch is on top of their head all the time, so they can easily have that pitch on a phone call, for instance. Ideally, you want to come to that point, and that's also why I said practice is so crucial, because really we're not always in a situation where we have slides, so we need to be able to cope with those situations. But still, I mean, you can easily talk a little bit about trends on a phone, for instance, telling that, we know that cybersecurity is becoming a threat. We know that the cost is increasing from breaches. I mean, those kind of trends you just know because they point towards your solution. So you can easily have them presented over the phone or whatnot, even over email. So what is your perspective when dealing with a non-professional buyer? A non-professional buyer, I'm not sure how to understand that, but if that is, for instance, someone that is not in procurement, again, I think that if you are meeting with someone within IT, business development, marketing, you want to make sure that you understand what drives them. So again, try to understand their specific pain points. A strong pitch deck is a good start, but sellers will also need to know how to use it. What is your recommendation for handover from global to local affiliates? And more importantly, how should local sales teams be trained? Yeah, this is a great point here. There's always the misalignment or the difficulties in aligning global and local needs. I think ideally I would develop a global pitch that consists of the majority of the slides, and then you can customize it to the local needs by adding a few slides here and there. That's how I would do it. So this also means that majority of the presentation is developed by global or whoever involved in that team. And then you make sure that you have, for instance, a local reference case, or that you have, if your solution is localized, you also want to make sure that that comes across also, that you have the local needs to meet those buyer needs. And when it comes to training, I think that I think really training, I mean, it should not only be the global sales team that should be trained in this pitch deck, it should be all across. So you want to make sure that, the training does not only address the global, but also the local needs. So basically just have, local training sessions with each of the local units. That's what I would do. Do you have any learning to share on how I could optimally use my marketing department in development of sales decks? I often find marketing to come with a few glossy looking slides that I cannot really use in real life buying situations. Yeah, definitely. I totally understand where this question is coming from. Again, I have tried myself to be in a marketing department and not really be able to deliver on what sales actually needed. So I think my learnings is that, as I also said, you want to include sales in your development team. You want to make sure you have an experienced seller, someone who is recognized as an experienced seller inside the organization, not only to pick his brain and get his view on it. You also want to involve him in the rollout of the pitch to see that this is actually not something that was only done by marketing. We've specifically tried to make it relevant for you guys in sales by including this specific person in the process. So that's how I would do it. Make sure that you do not only have marketing capabilities in your development team. And that's what I mean about setting the right team. It's so fundamental, and it's super important. Why not speaking openly about competitors? Would this not be helpful for the customer to truly situate themselves in the market? For sure. I mean, I don't think you should shy away from talking about competition. I'm just saying that if you have a lot of competitors and you cannot come across everyone, there's also always the solution where you present different potential solutions where you know that the customers fit into some of these buckets. But again, I think that you should be it should be fine to mention competitors. I would actually encourage you to do it. But yeah, I'm not sure. I understand exactly what this means, because you should always talk about competitors. But if you're afraid of that, you can sort of you can hide a bit about presenting some potential solutions instead, and then don't mention competitors by name. But in my opinion, you should not at all shy away from it. What do I do if the customer does not see the same trends in the market? Yeah, that's a super good question. Again, I want to say that when we looked at what drives a good sales experience, you also saw that there was something in there about having a valuable, a unique perspective on the market. So in this case, if they don't see the trends, I don't see it as a bad thing, really. I think it really makes sure that you educate them and you can tell them why this matters to them. So ideally, the customer or the buyer would not know these trends. And I don't think that's a bad idea or a situation at all. I actually think it helps you to create the credibility that you need. If you can help them see things that they were not aware of, that's ideally where we want to go. So that's not at all a problem. But of course, it needs to be relevant. The trends need to point into their world. They need to also point towards a solution, but it needs to be something they can relate to, but not necessarily know. How will you handle trends and commercial insights and buyer channels and potential solutions in sales situations with a prospect where you have fairly low level of insights before the meeting and a portfolio of various products that might be relevant? Yeah, this is a good one. Again, this is where the stakeholder mapping could help a little bit, because ideally you want to know who's participating in the meeting. And I also think in most situations we know a bit about at least their title, who's going to join. So having a stakeholder list can really help you to see, okay, I'm meeting with, as I said earlier, a guy from IT. Then I know that I should probably go a little bit more deep on the technical side than compared to when I was meeting with someone from business development or procurement. So having that stakeholder list can really help to make sure that you at least know a little bit about their focus areas and pain points. And when it comes to a portfolio of various products, I have been in situations where in the pitch deck we have included everything we have. Lots of products, lots and lots of products. And the problem with this is it's so difficult for the buyer to, okay, there's a lot of things here, I'm not really sure which solution I should go with or what I find interesting. I think it's much better if you have an idea before you go into the meeting about what's potentially interesting for this customer. And what you could do is that if you have many products, you could have a pitch deck that shows your portfolio. So one slide showing all the different solutions you have, and then have a one-pager for some of the solutions that you want to go deep on. So prepare those one-sliders, specific product one-sliders that you can use in your pitch, and I think that would be a way to go. But you need to again guide the buyer and make a decision about what should be in there and what should not be in there. You don't want to overwhelm the buyer with all the different product solutions we have. That's an advice for me. We'll take one last question, as it says here. Would you structure your pitch flow differently if developing for sales enablement tools, like for instance Showpad? Sorry, I'm not sure I understand that question. Do we have another one, Hannibal? I'm not quite sure I understand it. Sorry for that. Okay, it looks like we are out of question, and I want to say a huge thank you for all of you. To all of you, if you want to reach out or have any questions or things we should talk about, please reach out to us. We will be happy to discuss this with you. So thank you very much for joining, and I hope you got some great learnings here.